Lord Dannatt, the former head of the British Army, to talk about, well, all the migrant stories in the news, in particular Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, facing something of a backlash over her plan to house migrants in army barracks. A very good afternoon to you, Lord Dannatt.
Hi, Julie. Good afternoon to you
Thank
too.
you so for joining us. What do you think of the plan? I mean, we are talking about only sort of, is it 900 migrants being moved out of hotels into army barracks from next month in Scotland and the south of England. It's a drop in the ocean compared to the 32,000 currently in hotels, and I think it's the 102,000 who are currently in some kind of accommodation in the backlog of asylum seekers. But is housing them in army barracks, is that the answer?
No, it's not the answer. Clearly, everyone's agreed that there is a problem, and that is housing migrants in comparative comfort in hotels, and therefore the government, I think, is quite right to do everything they possibly can to move them out into a more Spartan accommodation, which I think will be part of a detraction for people to come to this country. But just announcing that they're going to be put into disused army barracks is not the solution, particularly as I understand that the one in Inverness and the one at Crowborough, there's been no consultation with the local authorities or with local people about this sort of plan. And I think local people in any part of the country have an absolute right to be consulted, and for the authorities to reassure them that these people are going to be looked after properly. They're not going to be allowed just to roam around and cause mischief. So consultation is really important to reassure local people. If there are some surplus military bases that are suitable, well then fine. But of course, it's not just military bases. There are other facilities around the country that could be converted, probably putting porta cabins up and whatever, into accommodation to move these people out of expensive hotels. So no, military bases isn't the answer, but getting them out of the hotels is undoubtedly the right thing to try and do.
I think a lot of people prefer there are military bases than moving into, you know, number 48 down the road, and then we wouldn't necessarily know where people were. However, it has been interesting when we had the BB Stockholm barge at one point. I think it was like 400 migrants, although I think more than 400 arrived in one day in the week that opened. And human rights lawyers went, no, it's not suitable accommodation. But we actually got serving military personnel in a similar style barge right now. And certainly when we look at the barracks, I can bet you bottom dollar that there'll be human rights lawyers saying the accommodation isn't suitable, but apparently it was perfectly okay for serving men and women in our military.
Well, I think that's a very fair point. Soldiers like myself have lived for a long time in rough and ready accommodation, porta cabins, Coromec cabins. I mean, we've lived like that on umpteen deployments in Northern Ireland and the Balkans and elsewhere.
Yeah.
So this is ridiculous if human rights lawyers are going to make those sort of points. I mean, the fact of the matter is people need to be accommodated in the dry. They should be fed. They don't need to live a life of luxury. But wherever these camps are established, local people need to be consulted. Local authorities need to be very much part and parcel of all this. And there needs to be a consensus amongst the people that this is a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
But more particularly, of course, the government has got to process asylum applications much faster, apply more civil servants to look at these enormous number of cases. And then when there are reasonable grounds to grant asylum, then do it and let the people get into the community, get a job, start working, start paying for themselves, start paying taxes, and stop being a burden on the state. Edward Solomon, who's the chief executive of the Refugee Council, has been very vocal on this, and I think he's right. I mean, there are some countries where it's pretty obvious we're going to be granting asylum to individuals. Well, look, let's do it and do it quickly, get them out into the community, get them working, let them pay their own way, and reduce the burden on the taxpayer to have to accommodate all these people.
Lots of people have been calling up today, and we've had, you might have just heard a caller, Sarah. I mean, talking about being, actually, petrified, scared about, family members and friends losing their life to violence on our streets. We've got this spate of attacks and sexual violence and knife crime from migrants. Latest, of course, a man who's accused, a suspect only at this point, of a lot of us will have seen the video, horrific frenzied knife attack, which left a man walking his his dog, who'd intervened when he saw a man and a 40-year-old boy being attacked, left dead. The other two still in hospital with their very serious injuries. A lot of people are just saying, look, what can we do to stop these people coming into our country in the first place? We don't have to deal with all the issues afterwards if we can stop them. A lot of people are saying, where there's a will, there's a way. I mean, you were the head of the military, of the British Army. It's amazing how often when there's a crisis, people say, right, let's get the army to come and sort it out, whether it's building, Nightingale hospitals or getting petrol to places if they, and there's some sort of strike. We call in the army. If you were in charge, how would you solve this problem?
Well, it's a very multifaceted problem. I think just calling in the army isn't the solution. Although, of course, if it was decided that we're going to erect camps, a bit like the Nightingale hospitals, then the military and logistics staff are very good at setting those up very quickly, and it could be done. Again, going back to what I was saying before, provided they are in areas where the local people have been consulted and the local authorities are very much part and parcel of that. But I think this is a much wider problem, and I think every possible strand of activity should be followed, in particular working with our partners in Europe, our allies in Europe, to bear down on the smuggling gangs. I think the French need to be more proactive on the beaches to stop the boats actually setting off in the first place. I think the companies that are manufacturing and selling these extraordinarily flimsy but large inflatable boats, they need to be borne down on. There can't be a good purpose in any factory producing those large flimsy boats.
Yeah.
Our partners and our friends in Europe should be bearing down on our behalf to make sure that it's more difficult for people to come here.
But that is only part of the issue. I mean, there's lots to talk about, put the Navy, I know the Army, but put the Navy into the Channel and send people back. Is that just pie in the sky?
Of course, the trouble is that doesn't really solve the problem either, because we've got border force vessels, we've got RNLI vessels, and as soon as these people take to the boats and go out into the open sea, then there is a duty, an internationally recognised duty, to save people's lives. So that's why when they get partway across the Channel, they're then rescued, as it were, and brought into Dover or brought into Folkestone or wherever they're going to go, and then they've made it. They're in this country. So taking more action to prevent them actually setting off in the first place is one of the many things that should be doing. Once they're here, as I said just now, they should be processed much more quickly. Those who've got legitimate claims should be allowed to work, get work, join the workforce, start paying taxes, finding their own accommodation, and removing the burden. And those who shouldn't be here should be deported as quickly as possible.
We still have the issue, don't we, about the Afghan interpreters working alongside many of our British forces, helping to save their lives, and some who weren't even able to come to this country. And then we've got many whose names went on a list that was leaked by someone at the Ministry of Defence, and therefore people able to come here who frankly had no right to be here. What do you make of the latest state of play of that? Because we're talking about huge cost compensation and goodness knows what being considered in those cases.
Well, I think all these things have got to be looked at in a proportionate fashion. I mean, we have brought a lot of entitled Afghans here, and that is the right thing to do. I think there are still many cases that have still got to be looked into. Afghans who have fled to Pakistan trying to send them back to Afghanistan. I think we've got to intervene in some of those cases. But I think we need to be very cautious and proportionate about saying, well, just because there was a data breach, we should be paying them huge amounts of compensation. Yes, these things are unfortunate. Sadly, we don't live in a perfect world, and breaches do happen, accidents happen, things do go wrong. So we need to be proportionate and sensible about all this.
Always good to talk to you, Lord Dannatt, former head of the British Army. Thank you very much indeed.